Hi, I'm Rachel Dillon.
And I'm Marcus Dillon.
And this podcast is Who's Really the Boss, where we highlight the joys
and challenges
of running a business with your spouse or family.
Our mission is to strengthen families and businesses by helping listeners avoid the mistakes we have made so they can lead
and live happily ever after. All right, welcome back to Who's Really the Boss podcast.
Well, hey, thanks for having me back on your podcast.
Awesome. I'll say it's because you bought me lunch and Sonic in agreement to come to the office to record. So,
well, great. Yeah. And you totally gave away free advertising for someone that's not sponsoring us yet, but we sponsor them a lot. So, yeah, Sonic, if you're out there listening, would love some free Route 44s sent our way. That would be awesome.
Guaranteed the Dillons are your best customers for Sonic. So
you probably don't want to give them anything for free. So.
Yeah, so let's get back to it. We promised our listeners on the first episode, if you listened to our intro, if you made it through, you know that we are starting a new series called So You Want to Hire Your Spouse. And we have actually, as our first two episodes, a two-parter and going into things to consider before hiring a spouse. And just wanted to let everybody know that the reason that we know things to consider are probably because these are things we did not consider before deciding to work together. So I think that we tend to learn things the hard way and have now found it to be our calling to show people a better way of doing things.
Sure. I think I like to call things experiments. And that gives us an easy out, or me an easy out, if the experiment doesn't go as planned. Experiments with family members, hiring decisions around spouses, siblings, parents, those are not easy experiments to unwind if they don't go right. So, yeah, it'll be a great conversation. I don't think anybody listened. Hopefully they did not listen to the first podcast. So hopefully this is where they're starting. This is their journey with us, Marcus and Rachel Dillon.
Awesome. And so, Marcus, why don't you start with, first of all, what did we consider when we decided to work together? I think this will be a brief answer, but go ahead and share. What did we consider before I started working at Dillon CPAs?
There were pain points that existed in our business at that time, really finding someone that could be present, show up daily, do some administrative work. Other than that, we just knew we had a need. And we knew that the business was somewhat stable at that time to allow for your jumping off point, your retirement from teaching. And it was definitely not much consideration going into it. That should have been.
Yeah. So pretty funny that I had wanted to potentially leave teaching for a while until it came to the last year that I actually taught. I had received Teacher of the Year at my school the previous year, and then was honored to have student teachers in my class my whole last year. So I had a lot of help and was in a really, really good place with my teaching career, was doing great things, loving the kids. And then Marcus said, hey, if you ever were going to leave teaching, I need somebody at the office now. So that was really the considerations, was there was a need and I was a body to fill it. So.
And from a family perspective, our daughters were kind of through this program that was offered at your school and entering into kindergarten. And so daycare really wasn't an issue any longer for us in that consideration. So it was right from that family perspective. And that's something that we can touch on here in a bit as well about family needs. So, but yeah, to answer your question again, I don't think much was considered or less was considered now that we know.
All right. Well, then let's jump into a better way. So if someone is wanting to hire a spouse or thinking through that might be a great option for them, the first thing that should be considered is definitely the need that you're trying to fill. And so this is something that we've been working on at Dillon CPAs, actually here 10 years after the fact of getting started, of what are the positions within the firm. And so, Marcus, you want to talk a little bit about what we've been doing this year, what we should have done prior to me starting with Dillon CPAs, and really prior to probably most of the team members starting at Dillon CPAs?
I think most businesses can't come out of the gate with roles and responsibilities and what success looks like, scorecards, which is what we're doing now. And so you just have to start a lot of times with business and start with what you've got, even with some team members or employees that you're able to attract or bring with you. So what we're doing now is a result of growth and evolution of the business and firming up documentation, what success looks like, what do roles look like, what are responsibilities in that roles. When you start a business, I don't think that you can do that unless you have some capital. You have partners that are joining that business, that are starting it with you, some founders that are uniquely qualified for certain aspects that you don't have to go out and hire for immediately. But as any business owner that starts, you kind of have to do a lot of it yourself, give away things that you probably don't enjoy doing or don't enjoy doing well as you grow, because there's just not enough time in the day. So
I think you brought up two good points. The first being, we're talking about people from all different business backgrounds. So maybe someone starting from the ground up, maybe someone who inherited a business that's already fully functional and has positions, maybe a position that is being vacated by somebody else, or a position that's being created. So two different things to consider there. And then the other one was evolution. So you mentioned evolution, and I think for sure that roles and responsibilities within an organization that's like a living document, because they're constantly evolving based on the team members' unique qualities, talents, that they're able to bring to that position, to the whole team, what they do best, what they do well. And then as needs of the business change, then their position may change, and then roles and responsibilities need to follow to align.
Sure.
Yeah. So once the role is defined, what would you say
need is defined, next? Right?
The need is defined. I do think that there needs to be a little bit of thought, especially since if you're listening to this podcast, you're ahead of the game from where we were 8 years ago before I started. You're already pre-planning, which is huge. So so the need is there. You put a little bit of definition around what that need is, something in writing, hopefully. And then what would you say is next?
It really, and I think you got offended when I said this, what other options exist? So
I 100% got offended when, because you were very clear and quick to respond on the first thing what to consider when hiring your spouse is what other options are available.
Sure. Not eating those words yet at this point, but what other options exist? And we talk through this planning with clients a lot too, when they're looking at bringing on any new team member, whether they're related or not. So you would just be applying that same logic whenever you're thinking that a spouse will fit. So what other options exist from an admin perspective? Can you outsource? Maybe it's your bookkeeping or your payroll or your accounting. We know a lot about that. And so that's a place that options exist with other service providers. From an admin perspective, how much can be done with a virtual assistant? How much can be done with technology? And so I think those are key areas to think through before you as a family go further into this business and have to plan not only one exit, but two or more whenever that time has come. And so I think that's really important. What other options exist?
Yeah. And so one of the reasons that we found what other options exist, I think what we've seen with us, with our clients, it's easy to give to a spouse because there's a level of trust that doesn't exist likely with any other person. And so you're able to hand off things that maybe you wouldn't give to someone that you don't know, especially maybe not someone brand new off the street that you really don't know if they weren't a friend or, a close referral that you've hired. But the other thing that we found is when you do that, if you want to be out with your spouse, vacations, holidays, illness, whatever may come up, now you've got two positions that there's no one to do that. So unless you're really wanting to go on vacation alone without your spouse and leave them behind, you can't really just give them exactly what you are taking care of at the time.
Yeah, a great example of that was we have a friend who's a firm owner similar to us. His wife did not work in the business, and he was becoming overwhelmed with email. And he gave the role of sorting his email and doing response to his wife, which is great. And you could easily hand that off to other people. There's whole industries that exist with virtual assistants and email and things like that. And so listened to what he did and said that's great temporarily. And where do you go? How do you get her out of that role very quickly? And so just because when you're on vacation, those emails still come in. And if you're on vacation with your spouse or as a family, that's probably not the best.
Yeah. So anything else on need that's trying to be filled or other options that exist other than hiring your spouse? Do you have any other recommendations of, I know you mentioned virtual assistant, and really just being conscious of what aspects of the job that you are thinking of delegating to your spouse?
After you really define what needs have to be met, just like you would do with anything, do you go to market? Do you go look at leaders in that space? Who is the best administrative assistant? Who is the best company that can provide those services? Who's the best bookkeeper? Who's the best payroll company? Is your spouse better than one of those options? And so I think that's the other piece. Are you setting your spouse or this family member up for failure from day one because they're not uniquely qualified for your need? And so I think that's probably another talking point that we looked at and is looked at when you're interviewing for any other position and we give our spouse, they can do it well, or at least that's what I always say. So you give a lot of grace and expect them to succeed. And maybe that's not their calling. Maybe that's not how they are wired. So that's something to think through, the unique qualifications and gifts that person already has and how that looks in that role.
Yeah. And so I would say that would be, kind of after you've decided on the need that needs to be filled, your spouse's unique qualities, talents, interests, do they align with the need that's there? Some things that we have learned is you have to be cautious. If you have a spouse who is a people pleaser or a very high achiever, they may be able to do any job very well, and in the beginning be able to do that job at a very high level. However, you run the risk of burnout or conflict just because that doesn't necessarily align with what they've been called to do or what they've uniquely been created to provide.
Yeah, I think based on experience alone, you've done well in everything that kind of you've taken on over the years. And you really have to listen to those pain points where you're stretching that other person and it really is not fun anymore. And, there were certain aspects of our business